Anyone and everyone who has ever wanted to be a movie maker or a visual storyteller has usually gone through gleeful spikes of enthusiasm of, yay, wow, I'm going to make a movie. But very, very few amateur filmmakers actually understand what it means to take a movie from beginning all the way through to the end. And this is a big reason why a lot of them fail. What we're going to talk about in this episode is the 7 major stages or phases that any film or visual storytelling project will go through, and how knowing them can help make your project a success. I'm Dare. I live in Hollywood. I've been working in and around films for pretty much my entire life, and I created Dare Cinema to help anyone who's interested in movie making and visual storytelling. I do 2 episodes a week, and I cover not just tips, tricks, and techniques, but a lot of the more general aspects of acting, writing, directing, editing, and the other parts that actually go into making a production, and also things that people don't talk about as much, which is like the nuts and bolts of how a film is put together, such as budgeting, scheduling, permits, and the problems that you can run into and how to avoid them. Click here to subscribe, and click here to get added to the mailing list for the things that I send out, like free stock footage, checklists that you might find helpful, and other little things such as project files that go with tutorials that I do. So let's go ahead and get started. And what we're going to talk about in this episode, and using something I've created called the Filmmaker's Checklist, is the 7 major phases of film production. And the checklist takes us through 100 steps to take your film from beginning to end. So let's talk about the first phase. That's conceptual. What is the conceptual stage? It's really, where do you get the idea to make the movie? Well, inspiration can come from anywhere. We all know that. But the conceptual stage is more than just having an idea. It's also coming up with the full understanding of what does executing that idea mean. Are we talking about a 5-minute short film? Are we talking about a Christmas video for the family? Are we talking about a $100 million 2-hour blockbuster? The conceptual stage is really where you have to do a lot of the work to make sure that you're telling the right story for what you can tell. Let's say you've got maybe $50,000 that you have access to, or let's say you have no money that you have access to. Coming up with an idea and a concept for a $100 million blockbuster film isn't really going to get that film made very fast because you don't have access to the resources to make it. Now you can go out and find the money. If it's a great idea, you can get investors and people involved. But the journey is a much longer one. You just have to decide, what is the concept of the story you want to tell, and what's it really going to take to take that idea from beginning to end. If you look at the checklist under the conceptual stage, you'll see a bunch of steps that cover deciding what the film is about, where does it come from, what's the scale of the film, as well as important questions like asking yourself if you honestly have the resources and funding attainable to make that project. And you know what? It's not a problem if you don't. Just come up with a different concept and put that one off to the side when you've gathered a few more successes and people are really willing to invest in you. That's the conceptual stage. It's really understanding what are you getting yourself involved in and what is the story. So what do I mean by the resources stage? Well, no matter how small your budget is, even if your budget is 0, you still need resources to get your movie made. And if you look at the checklist, I've covered 4 things that the best filmmakers focus on when they have limited or no resources. 1, how to make the most with what they have. 2, keep it simple and don't try to make the film something it isn't. 3, add production value by finding cheap or free resources. And 4, focus on telling an amazing story within the confines of budgetary reality. Now, on several occasions, people have come to me super excited about making a film, and they've got their script and they're ready to go. Let's go make this movie. And having a script already in hand that hasn't been written with the concept that took into account the resources it takes to make it can often be more of a burden than not. Because if you haven't written the story yet, you can always work the concept around until it can realistically be made for the resources that you have. So this is important. Looking again at the checklist, you can see that there's things like actors, locations, props, scenery, costumes, specialty items, film equipment, lighting equipment, audio equipment, transportation, food for people while you're shooting. All of these factors and many more that I cover in the checklist can heavily affect the type of film that you can actually make. So don't worry about having a script at this stage of the game yet, and just focus on first discovering what resources do you actually have access to. And it's not just monetary. It's also locations that you can shoot at for free, favors that people owe you, equipment companies nearby that would lend you their equipment if you just put a little credit in the film that said, hey, this equipment was provided by blah blah productions. And you'll be surprised. There's a lot of people who will help you and who want to see you become successful as a filmmaker, because it also means future business for them. So resources stage, figure out what you have to make a movie, and then go into the writing stage. All right, the writing stage. That means we've gone through the conceptual stage and we've gone through the resources stage. We know what the film's about and we know we have the resources to make it. Now look, I know a lot of people can sometimes get depressed when you're like, oh, you can't make that movie because of the funds available or stuff like that. This isn't about lowering expectations. It's about getting your movie made. And there have been so many blockbuster mega successes that have been made for very little money. And it just came down to the filmmakers really understanding how to make the resources they have tell an amazing story and look good enough. So if you look at the checklist, you'll see that I don't go into too much detail on the writing stage. And that's just because a lot of people have different ways that they go about writing. And saying, here's how you write a screenplay could result in endless arguments or people getting offended. And that's not my point. My point is, write a movie however you want, but write it so that you can make it. And you know, there's a few things in there like, go ahead and script your trailer while you're at it so you can grab a few extra scenes that you don't have to pull out of the film, so you're not giving away the film when you release trailers. And then also, before you move into doing it, do a reading of your script. Get some actors or some friends, sit around at a table, and read the script so you can actually hear it and make any changes. And this will help you from having to make a lot of changes on the set when you find out that things aren't working as well in real life as they were on the page. Okay, script in hand, concept good, resources good. Let's talk about the next phase. Pre-production. What is it? Very simply, it's everything you need to have ready prior to rolling your cameras. Now, only in the most ideal of circumstances, and I'm talking 1% of the time, is everything fully ready before you start shooting. It's actually almost unheard of. But you do need to have enough ready so that once you start shooting, you never stop and you're never held up during the shooting process, because it can be really costly in terms of crew morale and funds. The checklist covers the nitty-gritty of this in pretty decent detail. Not perfect, but it should get your juices going in terms of the things that you need to have ready to shoot. Just think with the fact that a film is a living, breathing organism. The journey from beginning to end of the film is filled with frustration, depression, problems, and things that you never saw coming. And a large part of your job as a filmmaker is to solve the problems that come up. And if you do pre-production right, you'll have a lot less problems to solve in the shoot production stage. And let's talk about that one. The shoot production stage. Well, that's easy to think with, right? This is where you just roll cameras on everything that you just spent the time writing and pre-producing. And as you go through the checklist, you'll see that a lot of the individual and smaller details are covered in there. But there are two primary things you need to keep in mind on the shoot production stage. And that is, one, clearly communicate at all times. Not just who needs to be where with what, but also what exactly is it that you're trying to capture in filming any particular scene. That way the people working with you can help you make the film that you're trying to make. If they don't know or understand what it is you're trying to get, you're just going to get frustrated, and they're just going to get frustrated because they don't know what you want. And the second one is be willing and ready to solve problems. No matter how good your preps were, problems will happen. As you work on bigger and bigger productions, there will be people whose job it is to solve those problems. But in the meantime, be ready when the problems hit and try and solve them in a positive fashion. This will help keep your set positive, and that's very conducive to a good, fast, and fun shoot. And that's the shoot production stage. Next, the hard part. The post-production stage. It's easy to understand, right? You take all the footage that you shot, you put it in the edit bay, you edit it together, you add music, you add sound effects, you add special effects, you do color correction, you get the sound perfect for theater playing or whatever format you're doing it in, and you get it ready to distribute. But there are so many hundreds and hundreds of details and laborious tasks that go into making that happen. And as you'll see as you go through the checklist, that I covered the broad strokes of post-production in pretty decent detail, not microscopic detail, but the broad strokes. Now there's one important thing that I want to tell you about the post-production phase, and this is, as a filmmaker, it's very rare that I've worked with even people who have made dozens of films that don't go into the editing bay and suddenly hit a massive disappointment or depression because this whole vision that they started out with is not what they're seeing on their screen. It's just part of the process. As you start editing the film and refining the performance in the edit bay, adding sound effects, adding music, adding color correction, you will find that this amazing story that you believed in, that made you go through all the pain and agony of making a film, starts to come to life on the screen. And maybe it's not perfectly exactly how you wanted it. So what? You still finished a movie. All right, the distribution phase. Well, you've just gone through all the pain and agony of making your film, and maybe in the best of scenario, you have a 3-hour epic masterpiece or killer action movie or whatever it is, or you might have a total train wreck. But either way, you've finished a movie, which separates you from about 6.5 billion to 7 billion other people on this planet. And that's something, no matter how hard or harsh or how it came out, that you should be proud of. But you need to get it out there so people can see it. And once again, the checklist will go through some of the broad strokes of how to get distribution done for your film. And realize today we have an embarrassment of riches in terms of distributing our films, whether it's through film festivals where major studios can bid on it, or just directly via YouTube, Vimeo, Amazon, iTunes, Hulu, Netflix, and the streaming services that are popping up every day. There's never been an easier time to get people to see your movie than now. So 2 last things that I want you to think about in terms of distribution. And one is, get your film distributed. Whatever you have to do. Don't let it stay in a closet somewhere for 5 years. And even if you didn't think it was that great of a movie, you never know. People might really respond to it, and how they respond to it will also help you advance and evolve as a filmmaker. And the second one, there's no way that you finished your film without help from people. And during the distribution phase, there will be a lot of conversation, maybe even awards and acclaim. Never forget to thank the people who helped you finish making your movie. Because ultimately, filmmaking is a team activity. And if a team feels rewarded and knows that you understand the contributions that they made, they will help you more and more on your journey as a filmmaker. So there you go. Those are the 7 stages of filmmaking. Conceptual, resources, writing, pre-production, shoot production, post-production, and distribution. Okay, so that's it for this episode of Dare Cinema. Thank you for watching. I hope it was informative and helpful. Remember, you can click here to subscribe or click here to join the mailing list and probably click somewhere over here for another episode. But I wanted to leave you with this. In your journey as a visual storyteller, don't forget, always focus and strive to tell a better story. I'll see you next time.